It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Sylvia, Shira, Lakeland. We are here in Beit Vegan in Jerusalem. And Sylvia, you have a passion for Jewish history and the story of Sugihara. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? Where were you born and when were you born, if you don't?
Very well. I was born in India in 1944, and my sister and I have a sister who was born in Lahore in Pakistan. Now it's Pakistan.
Wow.
So I have a sister from Pakistan, I am from India, but our parents in fact are Polish. They were Polish, they were from Warsaw, and they were through the war. And so we have the whole story of one more couple running away during the war. So in 1939, my parents, when the war broke out, in December 39, they decided to run away. They set up a group, and in this group there were some friends of my father and my mother, and they also took a brother of each. My mother had a brother, my father had a brother, not the older ones, but not the younger ones, but they just took one of those, and they moved and they went to Białystok. The idea was to go to Białystok, and from Białystok up to Vilnius or to Kovno. They had to go up to Lithuania and pass the frontier. They had a lot of problems going through, like all of them, and but they arrived in Vilnius, and like many Jews, they were trapped between Russians and Germans in Vilnius. So at this time, my father managed to get, and he always used to tell us the story. He spoke very little about the war, and my mother also. There was very little. They wouldn't say anything. But the fact is that they went through, and they got the visas from Sempo Sugihara. And with these visas, they managed to go with the Trans-Siberian and got to Vladivostok, and from Vladivostok to Kobe. So once they were in Kobe, this was a problem because the war broke out in the Pacific, so a lot of them were moved on to Shanghai. My two uncles went to Shanghai because the joint only gave one per family, one visa per family to move on. So they didn't go to Shanghai. They managed to run away through Singapore, and from Singapore they went to Burma, and Burma, India. So all sorts of stories happened during this period, but they managed to get to India, and this is where they settled, and this is where I was born. So that's it.
Sylvia, can I just ask, did your parents ever discuss with you the incredible miracle about getting, first of all, the Curacao entry visa from Spartandijk and the Sugihara visas?
You know, it's unbelievable, but the fact is that, first of all, my father died when he was 60 years old. So he died very young, and being young, I was also very young, and I was not interested. I didn't know I had to ask all these questions. You see, this was not a subject talked at home. My father first of all, we were not allowed to learn Polish. I mean, he would speak Polish with my mother, but we were not supposed to learn Polish.
Did you understand a bit of Polish?
I do, because of course, it's enough that I understand everything. I just can't speak Polish, but I understand perfectly.
You spoke at home?
Yeah, because they used to speak between themselves, they spoke in Polish. But with us, it was always in English. We never knew anything about the war. We never knew anything about what had happened, what they did, what they didn't do. I learned a lot of things about what happened first of all, from a work that I did. My sister recorded my mother's story. So when she recorded my mother's story, there are a lot of things that come in when she talks about it. But of course, these are the angles that she tells us, and it's very interesting what they did and how they survived. Then there was the testimonies. There were the survivors, the Shoah survivors' witnesses in my uncles, because my uncles were in Shanghai, and when the war finished, they managed to go to Australia. So one uncle went straight to Australia, and the other uncle, he still tried to come to India and to come to Brazil, but he was then he wasn't happy there, and he went back to Australia. So but from these two uncles I knew some of the stories, and also because Daddy used to tell stories to his friends, the Polish friends, and from the Polish friends, after Daddy passed away, I heard more stories, I knew more things that were happening, but not specifically. I wish I had the time, the interest, opportunity. I was too busy studying and traveling, and a youngster, and as the subject was not open to, they didn't say anything. It was the times when they wouldn't mention anything.
Do you think they wanted to protect you and your sister?
I don't think it was a question of protection. It was, first of all, my mother always used to say that she didn't go through concentration camps. She didn't go through the terrible, dramatic situations of the survivors. So she thought that her story was not a story to be told. That this was one more story, one more survival life, like everybody has stories in life. So she didn't think it was important, nor that she should talk about it. She never, this is my mother's position. That she says, well, it wasn't important. We just did what we had to do. Life went on, and we were just going on, and but it's nothing to tell stories about.
Did you ever inquire about your relatives, grandparents, or the extended family?
No, first of all, I have no grandparents. They all died in Poland. All my grandparents, my grandfather and grandmother from both sides of the family, they all passed away in Poland. They were all alive, all happily living a normal life in Warsaw when the war broke out. My mother had cousins and aunts and grandmother. I mean, it was a normal life, and then suddenly they disappeared. We had an uncle, Uncle Miro. This was my mother's uncle. It means he was a brother of my grandmother. So he survived the war, and he came to Brazil. And I remember that he was completely out. He was completely crazy, because he went, after the war, he went to all the concentration camps. He was everywhere looking for family. And he comes to Brazil and says, there's nothing left. Nobody, no story. There's nothing to tell. And he wanted even to write a book, but eventually he got sick and he passed away, and he never wrote this book. But he was saved by a Polish girl. She was not Jewish, a goy, and she came with him to Brazil. But after he passed away, she went back to Poland, and she disappeared into space. Nobody knows anything about her. So really, there was no grandparents to ask, to talk about. I had a grand uncle. This was my father's uncle, but he was in Germany in 35, I think, or 34, and he ran away to the States. He managed to go to the States. So he was before the war, and he was just the grand uncle. I met him. He was the grand uncle. He was a lovely man, but he didn't have story. I didn't ask him any stories. What stories could I ask? It wasn't, we were not prepared for that. As my generation, my people, my sister, myself, we had a normal life. This was just our life.
And when did you first hear about Sugihara? Your parents never mentioned him?
Well, my parents never mentioned, but I heard about Sugihara. This was incredible, because in the group that ran away from Poland, there was a friend of my father. He was from Lodz, and he was in this group, and he ran away together. He was in Vilnius. He went through the Trans-Siberian. He did the whole thing. And when my parents ran away to India, he ran away to India with them. He managed to go together. So his name was Edwin Zeeman, and he came to Brazil. But before that, he went to fight with the Polish brigades, with the Allies. And he was in Montecatini, and then he passed, and then when the war finished, he decided to come to Brazil. We were already in Brazil, and one day he meets by chance my father on the street. And they meet, and from then on they were friends, and they were together until my father passed away. And after my father passed away, he was my babysitter. You know, he saw me being born, and he was together with me. So he was like a real uncle or a father or a companion.
Wow.
And so although I was traveling a lot, whenever I came back to Brazil, I would go and visit him and his wife, and he would tell me stories. So he told me about Sugihara. He told me about the story of the Curaçao visa
with the Zwartendijk.
Yes, no, he told me all the stories that he knew, how they got the existence of this Curaçao permit that allowed to have the transit permit from Japanese consulate, and how they managed to get it. And he also had an original visa, one of these documents that the visa, the transit visas. And he and when Sugihara's wife was in Brazil, because they made a lovely homage, they invited him, but he was already too old to travel, and his son, the older son, came with the mother. They were there in Brazil.
Were you in Brazil? In which
yes,
city?
They were in São Paulo.
Were you living in São Paulo?
I was living in São Paulo. I wasn't there, but they were there, and Edwin was there at their events, and he was there to thank. It was a big party to thank them for what had happened and how Sugihara had helped to survive, and the survivors. And so he told me more about, and he even told me very interesting stories about my father, how he got the visa, because it was very difficult to get this visa. And so this is how I got to know more details. And then I, of course, was interested, and I followed, and I read the Fugu Plan, the book, and I was following, because at a certain age, after my father passed away, I suddenly realized that all this source of information had gone. You know, because my father got sick, and in 3 months he suddenly passed away. So I didn't have any source of information.
And your mother wouldn't
yes, my mother, she told us, she was recording, but it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't this kind. It was a different angle of the story. So the fact is that my mother, of course, she told us a lot of things in the recordings, because I remember that my sister once decided that, because after my father passed away, I said, wait a minute, I have to collect the information to keep this information. I want to know more. We don't know anything about anything. And so I started putting together and collecting old papers, my father's old papers, my mother's. Sorry, so my sister recorded my mother's life, and I have this recording. And I said, well, now with my mother's recording, with the transcriptions of my uncle who lived in Australia, I wanted to collect all and write a book. For my children, for my I never was married nor had children, but my sister got married and she had 3 children, and I have 2 nephews, a nephew and a niece, who live in Israel.
Oh, wonderful.
So they came to Israel. So this is the beautiful story, because this was all a consequence of Sugihara as well. You know, they got married. My sister got married, had a lovely family with the 3 children. 2 of them are in Israel. Every one of them already got married. They live here. One lives in Beit Vagan, the other one lives in Neve Yaakov, and they have 4 kids each. 3 girls, and here are 3 boys and 1 girl. So these youngsters, you know, I want to write so that they know what was the story of the family.
So Sylvia, can I just mention this piece of paper which you're going to be showing us, which is exceptionally valuable. I mean, it's priceless. But these documents, that thank God you have kept the originals. I mean, because of these documents, your family, you're here, you are here,
we are here, the whole generation,
and the children and grandchildren are here from these documents.
From these documents,
before you show us the documents, which we so eagerly anticipate to see, how did you manage to preserve them, or how did you find them? Did you know they were so valuable?
Well, first of all, let's talk about how my father got these documents. Because this was practically, you know, a wave. As soon as they discovered that Sugihara was issuing a visa, in a couple of days, the whole Jewish community knew what was going on. And my father was surely one of those who was very attentive. He had a whole group of people together with him, and he was very attentive to see how to get out. You know, the problem was they were just blocked between Russians and Germans. They didn't know there was nowhere to go. So as soon as he knew about it, he went running to the consulate, like all of them, and they were all standing at the door, and hundreds of them standing at the door trying to get. And my father managed to get into the consulate from a side door. He went into the consulate and he was hiding there. So at the end of the day, when no more people were going around here and there, he came out of the closet and he said, listen, I need 13 visas. And so he spoke to personally to Sugihara, and he was telling his story to him, and with this he got the original visas. Because the problem was that at the moment you had the original, they started to have the falsified. You know, and the falsified, you can immediately know that this is falsified because the copies and the Japanese writing and whatever, so you couldn't imitate. And the Russians knew that. So the Russians knew very well that you had an original visa or a falsified visa. So Daddy managed to have all these originals, and with this they were very lucky, and they managed to get the money and go and get into the Trans-Siberian.
It was from Moscow to Vladivostok.
Yeah, and they went from Moscow to Vladivostok, but it's interesting because there is, in a moment, I remember my uncle mentioning it, that one instruction was, don't go, the train stops in Mongolia, don't go down, don't leave the train, because if you leave the train, they'll leave you there.
Wow.
You know, so this was an instruction, keep away from the train, don't go away from the train. So I have a doubt if they went with the Trans-Siberian all the way, or if they had also the Trans-Mongolian, you know, because they were the 2 trains. But the fact is that they got to Vladivostok, and from there they were, with the ships, they were managed to get into Japan.
They went to Tsuruga and then to Kobe.
Tsuruga and
Kobe. How long were they in Kobe for?
They were in Kobe, I think, 6 months.
Wow.
Yes, and it was very interesting because this is where my mother was very successful, because my mother knew how to sew, and so she it was a very funny story, because there is one fellow who, I think he was from the Joint, and he spoke a little bit of English and a little bit of Polish, you know, a little bit of everything. And my mother couldn't speak English, and she spoke German, but she couldn't speak English. And the fact is that they took her to Army and Navy store. This was the famous Army and Navy store in Kobe. And the owner was saying, listen, I have all the materials, but we need to cut it and make dresses. We need to make outfits. But I want you to make only for grown-ups. Don't make any children's clothes, just for grown-ups. And my mother said, yes, okay, I'll do it. But he translated that she should make them all for children. It was exactly the opposite. And this is how she did all the clothes for children. The men nearly had a heart attack. But they sold it in 24 hours. There was nothing in the shop. Everything was sold out. Everything was done. So my mother was she was active already, getting money and working and so on. But then the war broke out and they had to run away. And when they ran away, the Army and Navy store where my mother was working, he dealt with her and he said, you know, I'm going to sell you our shop, and wherever you get to, I'll send you the shop. You have to get me a certain amount of money. And my mother was collecting this money from all sorts of ways, and she managed to get some money, and they agreed to that. And okay, so she said goodbye, she gave the money, and she went and they went running away. Finally they got to Burma, and in Burma it was terrible, the situation, but they were running away on a ship. They saw a ship leaving and they just jumped into the ship and said, let's get out of here. And the ship was transporting Chinese slippers. And my mother was running barefoot, so she got a lot of slippers from China. And this ship was stopped from Burma in India. And so they went down in India because they were not going back to Europe. So they stayed in India. And so some time later, I don't know how long, but maybe a year, sometime later, my mother received everything that from this shop of Army and Navy. Wow. And she opened a haute couture shop in India.
Where in India?
In New Delhi. In New Delhi. So she was sewing, she had a shop, and she was doing a very successful, attending all the ladies of the British community.
And was there also a Jewish community in Delhi?
I don't know. I suppose there must have been something, but I have no idea. I don't know anything about that. I know that my father was dealing a lot with Nehru and with Gandhi.
Really?
Yes, and because he was an advisor of a bank, of Deloitte's bank, and he was managing a hotel for there was a hotel in Simla when everybody used to go away for summer because it was very hot. So they would go in summer to Simla, and there was a hotel there that belonged to the bank, and my father would manage this hotel, and this is where I was born. I was born in Simla.
And your sister, is she older than you? Or?
No, she's younger than me, 4 years, and she was born in Lahore.
In Lahore, which is
Lahore. Today is Pakistan. Yeah.
How did they get to Lahore? It was all part of India.
Because this was all part of India, and they were working in Lahore, and my mother also had business in Lahore, and so they went to Lahore, and this is when the story started to become very bad, and this is where there was a very nice story, how my family became Lakeland, because when Lord Mountbatten came to Lord Mountbatten came to India to give India back to the Indians, he called my father and he said, well, you know, you're not being British, I can't give you an OBE, a CBE, I can't give you for your work, your honorary work here, but I can give you one thing, that is a British passport and a British name. Now if you have a passport, you can have a new name. So he said, well, okay, so what name? So he says, why don't you take Lakeland? Lakeland is the name of the castle where I live and where I'm going to die. So he said, okay, can be Lakeland.
This is from Mountbatten.
And so we became a Lakeland family in India.
And you got a British passport?
Yes, we got a British passport, and it was a passport we were allowed to travel. We were on my my father's. It was a passport with the family. We had one passport for the family. My mother had one, my father had another. And with the British passport, we left India. We came to London, and from London we went to Brazil.
Is this around 48 when before the partition?
No, this was in 50. We left India in 50.
It had already been divided.
It was because the war was 1948.
Yeah.
The war was 1948-49, so this was already the division, and so everything was being dealt as Pakistani.
How old were you at this time?
I was 7.
Do you remember the war?
I don't remember the war. No, the war I don't remember.
Do you remember growing up in India?
Yeah, I remember growing up in India. I remember the house we lived in. I remember the holidays in Srinagar and the water and walking on horses and elephants and zoos. You know, things that children remember. But it was a lovely life. I mean, it was nice. My mother, who used to work very, very hard. We had all the bearers and all the maids. You know, the life in India. So it was a very nice life we had there for the time we were there. And I used to go to school, and I had friends, and I had a lovely dog.
Did you mix in with the Jewish community or not really?
I don't remember any Jewish community. I have no idea of that. I don't have any idea. I know that my father had 2 Jewish friends. I remember he had a Jewish friend who later went to London. So I'm sure that my father was involved with the Jewish community apart from all the other things. But it's as a child I had no stories about that.
But were you aware that your family was Jewish?
Yes, I was aware that we were Jewish, but not really, you know, in all the documents and everything, they are very clearly declared as Jewish, as a religion Jewish. Even in the documents my mother had in Poland, it's very clear that because they had to specify that they were the religion, and in all the documents, and here, everywhere you have documents, it's specified that they are Jewish. But we didn't have much of I don't remember really having a Jewish family, a Jewish background. Yeah, not stories or keeping traditions. I think it was not. There was no time for it. You know, it was.
But Sylvia, can I just ask? Did you ever mention to your parents, how come I don't have grandparents, or what happened?
Of course I mentioned. We had. Of course we mentioned. What about the grandparents? They're gone. You know, I'm already in India. My mother got postcards. She got postcards from her sister, still was alive, in 1942 or 43, and saying that they all had passed away. You know, there were my grandmother, my grandfather. I know that my grandfather from my father's side, he had a heart attack. And he died because they had a very nice business in Warsaw, and the Gestapo came and took away the whole building and took over, and they had the base of Gestapo in this building. And when my grandfather saw that, he had a heart attack and he died. He couldn't take it.
And can I ask, what made your family decide to go to Brazil?
Well, my parents decided to go to Brazil. First of all, I had an uncle already in Brazil. This was the older brother of my father. And he, when my father ran away, he was still in Poland, and he's arrested by the Gestapo. And when he's arrested by the Gestapo, he has to give away everything. He has to give all the properties and whatever, you know, to be able to get out alive. He was still in the time when you can get out of Gestapo alive. So he got alive, and he managed to run away. But he ran away going down to France, to Portugal, and from Portugal he had an opportunity to take a ship and go to Brazil. So this was just refugees running away, and they managed to do it through Portugal. And you know that there is a famous man in Portugal, Aristides de Sousa Mendes.
Yes,
and he was a great guy, and he was giving
visas. He was a diplomat who also
he was. He was one of the righteous also. I met a long time. I met his daughter. One day his daughter shows up, and I say, "Are you the daughter?" He says, "Yes." "Okay, I'm going to take special care of you."
And where did you meet her? In Brazil?
In Portugal, because I lived 15 years in Portugal.
Really?
Yeah, I lived in Portugal. So
where in Portugal?
Pardon? In Lisbon. Yeah.
Wow.
I was 15 years in Lisbon, and then after that already at that time I was she was my client, the daughter.
What were you doing in Portugal?
I was doing, well, first of all, I was in Brazil. I graduated as a biologist, and then I went to Italy for my post-graduation. I came back to Brazil, but there was no research in Brazil at that time, so I went into business. I started and I made a post-graduation and master's in management and advertising and marketing. So I started to work, and after 10 years I got fed up with Brazil, and I said, enough. I have enough of Brazil, because it was, you know, a crazy country, but I was working there. So with my marketing and my advertising, I went to the States. I stayed 1 year in New York. Then I came back. I wasn't happy living in Brazil, so I packed up and I moved to Portugal. And in Portugal I was 15 years there. Only that after 5 years I was in Portugal, I had a problem and I got blind.
Really?
Yeah, I lost my vision, and I slowly lost my vision. 92 this was, and this went until the year 2000. In 2000 I couldn't see anything. I had only 5% vision. So at that time I started doing exercises and trying to discover ways of natural vision therapies, and with these natural vision therapies I managed to get my vision back. You can see
without any operations?
No, I had this cataracts operation, only the cataracts, but because of this I became a vision therapist. I gave up all my careers and I became a vision therapist. And you know, 10 years, the last 5 years I almost couldn't see anything, so I was studying Chinese medicine, and I was studying all sorts of activities, and going in more into the spiritual world. And then I said, you know what, now I'm going to do my exercises, I'm going to get back my vision, because I don't take a no for an answer.
Wow.
And that's what I did. I said, so in the year 2003, I'm in Portugal, but in 2003 I went to Brazil. I operated my eyes, my cataracts, and my vision came back, because the cataracts were interfering with what I had worked on. And from then on I became a vision therapist, and that's what I do till today.
And you have your vision?
Yes, as you can see.
There's no glasses, no contacts?
No, I have glasses when I want to, when I'm tired, you know, but I don't. I was already, when I was 6 years old, I started using glasses. I was very strong myopic. So, but I eliminated everything. I don't have anything else. Now I only have a normal life. I do vision exercises and I help people, and that's what I do. This is my work.
And can I ask, when you were in Lisboa,
yeah,
did you ever associate with the synagogue? With the
Yes, I did. I tried. I was not very much related, but there is a very small community of Sephardim Jews in Lisbon, and they have a shul there, a very discreet, very beautiful building, and
I've been in the shul.
yeah, it's a because it's hidden on the street. You don't see anything as it used to be.
It's actually quite beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's quite beautiful. And now it is very, but at my time when I was there, first of all, the rabbi had passed away. And so the community was too small. They couldn't afford a rabbi, and so it took a long time till they sorted this out. So I wasn't very much related to I was too busy surviving, you know, and I had so much to do. But when my mother, when I decided to bring my mother to Portugal, because my mother was living in Brazil together with my sister. So in 96 or 96, I decided to bring my mother to live with me in Portugal. And I tried to get the help of the community, the Jewish community, because she being Jewish and she could, you know, but it was very, very close. It's a very closed society and very, you know, very European, but very closed. And the Jewish community is really small. Now it's flourishing. Now it's doing a very nice work. First of all, in my time, while I was there, they had nothing going on, for example, with the Marranos and with in Belmonte, you know. Yeah. I once went there, there was nothing happening there. Now they are fine and they are more open. There's a rabbi in Belmonte. There's a rabbi in the north, in Porto, yeah. Yes, and there's I think he's a nice rabbi in Lisbon. And so they are working hard, and I met some of the members of the community, but I was not involved. And when they were not very receptive to help me with my mother, you know, then I said, well, I'm not going to lose my time. They don't help me, they don't help me, so let's go on. But after that, my mother passed away in 99.
In Portugal? In Portugal.
She's buried in Portugal. She's buried in Portugal. My father is buried in São Paulo. And it was times, you know, but I wasn't attached or had much to do with the Jewish community there. I didn't really, I am related, but not, I am a member of the community and so on. My mother is there, but...
and what made you decide to come to Israel?
Well, I decided to come to Israel. Well, then I went back to Brazil. When my vision came back, when I got my vision back, I decided that the project of Portugal was over. I had done what I had to do. My mission in Portugal was over, and I decided I didn't know where I'm going. I packed up everything and I decided to come to Brazil. I have a sister there, and so I decided, well, I'm going to see what's going on in Brazil. And when I started seeing what's going on, I was 10 years in Brazil. I didn't realize the time passing by, because I started working. I started doing my vision exercises, you know, training people, having private clients. And I started a program that was very unusual, that was voluntarily teaching people in the park. So I would go in the park and I would do my exercises, and people would ask me, what are you doing? I would say, come do it together with me. And like this I started doing teaching people how to improve their vision. And with this work of improving their vision, I went up to 15,000 clients in 10 years. Wow. In the park, voluntary work. Apart from that, I had my private clients, and I started working, but I was working very hard, because I would go every day to the park, and I was concerned about everybody, and I was doing my clients. So I was very busy. People knew, they were looking for me. I had clients. I had a very busy clientele. And then I got sick. I started having heart problems, and I ended up in a hospital. And when I was in the hospital, I said, you know what am I doing here? I realized I was 10 years in Brazil. This is not my country. I am not related to this country. I have nothing to do with this place, because I kept on going and coming all my life. And I said, you know what? It's time to go home. Wow. So I said, and I was in the hospital, as soon as I left the hospital, I called up my nephew. We had a Skype meeting of the whole family, and I said, listen family, I'm on my way to Israel. So my nephew was crazy. He says, tell me what you want and come. You are welcome, we are waiting for you. My niece was excited, and in 2.5 months I was in Israel. In April I was in the hospital, in July I was here.
Amazing. Have you ever visited Israel before?
I had been to Israel twice before, but you know, and I liked it, very much. I was in Brazil, you know, the first time I came to Israel was 1961 with my father. When my father decided that we all had to come to Israel, and we came and we went to the kibbutz Givat Brenner. He had his friends there at this kibbutz. These were the friends who, from Shanghai, from the group that escaped from the Trans-Siberian and got to Kobe, some went directly to Palestine
and
to Givat Brenner. So my father went to visit them, and it was a tremendous visit. We had a wonderful time, and we went all over. We went from the north to the south to Eilat. There was nothing in 61, you know, there was nothing in Eilat. They were starting the project of desalinization. It was incredible. It was a wonderful trip. And I remember that after that we went to visit some of Daddy's friends in France and in England, people with whom he had related, some Jewish friends he had related during the war, and in India as well. And at the end of the trip, I told my father, I remember telling him, Daddy, the only place I want to go and I want to stay is in Israel. Let me go to Israel. He said, no way. I'm not going to let you. I want my daughter near me.
Wow.
He wouldn't let me go. But I wanted to come to Israel already in 61.
And how long have you been in Israel now?
Now I'm 2.5 years. In July will be 3 years. I'm very happy. I'm very happy. This is the place to be. I'm happy that I'm here in Jerusalem. I'm happy with my family. I'm here. This is my place. I was waiting all my life to be at my place. So this is my place. So I'm here. My family is here. I love my family. They love me. And now I'm starting to work. And I started already in Beit Balev. Beit Balev is, I give there voluntarily classes of vision. And now I have to have clients. I'm starting to get private clients and start lecturing and giving classes. This is my world. So I had a site. I have a site. I made on the web. I have a site. But when I came to Israel, I stopped. I had a site English and Portuguese, but I didn't have any more the time to do that. So now I have to update my site and start doing again new work and finding clients and helping people. This is my purpose, to help.
Sylvia, can I ask, and I think everybody is waiting in total anticipation. You said earlier that you went through your parents' documents, and it must have been quite a find. I mean, a treasure to find.
It was incredible.
The visas,
I couldn't believe
the original papers
I couldn't believe
that saved your family, and that's why you're here today.
There you are.
How was the feeling when you actually saw these papers?
You know, there were some old papers, and my sister said, "Oh, here are some old papers in I don't know, it was in a box."
Wow.
And it was just there, you know, and it was just put away and nobody was looking at it. And my sister knew that I decided to put together everything that I could. So I said, listen, whenever we start moving around, let's try to find papers. When my father passed away and my mother came to live with me in Brazil, in Portugal. She had an apartment and I sold the apartment. So, you know, when I sold it, a lot of things came out, but there were some old papers, and my sister said, okay, I'll keep the papers, you know, there might be something, but we never thought that we could find anything of this value, of this, you know, importance of, and then just before I was leaving for Israel, my sister, when I was sick in bed, my sister said, I have here all sorts of papers, have a look at them, see if you can find something that can be of any interest. And that's when I found the papers.
And your
that's
parents,
when I found
they
this
never
paper.
mentioned that we have the original documents, the visas that saved our lives?
No.
That's a miracle.
It was a, you know, it was
like
never
a real miracle.
You know, when you, and it is so incredible, because when you look at it, I have seen it. I have seen this paper. This is the visa. You see, I have seen it in the museum. You know, I have seen this.
So that's a picture on the. You're showing a picture of.
Yes, I'm showing the picture. I hope you can see that. This is my father, my mother, and you have here all the papers, and you have the stamps, and here are all the stamps behind. You see.
And there's on the
other side.
Upper left side is the Watendijk Curaçao.
Yes, yes, you have the Curaçao, and then there is still a piece of.
We have the Sugihara visa, which you can see. So
This is the Sugihara visa, yeah. And then I still have a piece here, and this piece is the transit to Burma. Because once they had this, this was their document of moving. So this is a transit. You see, this is a transit, and it says down here, Curaçao and Burma and Curaçao and Palestine.
Wow.
Because by then, you know, my father was already looking at all the possibilities of where to go. So go to Canada, go to Palestine, go to, you know, there were all the searches. I have all sorts of documents, of letters with the Pakistani.
Can we see the picture with your parents?
Absolutely. Here you are.
So this is.
Is it near enough?
And have you shown, I'm sure you've shown this to your nieces and the children and grandchildren. They
have not seen it yet.
They haven't seen it yet?
No.
This is priceless. This is really something extraordinary beyond belief. And it's in unbelievable condition that it was never...
Yeah, because it was used and it was put away. And this was kept. It's incredible.
It's just
because
amazing,
you know,
that your parents never mentioned that we have these incredible documents that saved our lives.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was by, you know, they had so many incredible moments in their life, and then how they became Brazilian, my parents, and you know, so there's a lot of.
But Sylvia, can I mention these documents? Are priceless.
Oh yes.
And I think this is something that should be handed down from generation to generation.
Yes, this is my intention, yes, of giving them. Afterwards we will see who is going to be the one
custodian.
The custodian, yeah, we will see who will keep it for the future, for the family. So there you are. So this is
Sylvia, I cannot thank you enough. It's been absolutely
I hope I didn't talk too much. These are the stories. There are so many stories about that.
But Sylvia, I just wanted to mention, hearing your amazing story. Your parents must have had tremendous courage to have the foresight to have seen that, to leave your home, to leave, you know, Warsaw. No one knew what was going to be in the future.
They had, because you see, this was incredible. They were just married. And they were living in a new building, and in this building there was some member of the American embassy who lived in the building, and he was telling my father, he was saying, listen, what are you doing here? Get out of here. What are you waiting for? And my father said, no, this will all come. Let's go. Because as he had a lot of business in in Warsaw, but he had also business with Lithuania. They were going around. So he said, well, I'll go just to Lithuania. We'll go there. We'll sit there for 6 months. I have clients there who owe me money. I'll get the money from them, and then we'll come back. And they will come back. So my mother lost 3 brothers and sisters, and my father lost all the family. They never came back. And my mother, they just went with the cloth they were wearing, with a bag, and that's it. They were running away. I mean, they didn't have a chance of coming back or looking back. And this was, I think, that I inherited from them, this fabulous perseverance, the strength to the fight, to don't take a no for an answer. So my father was there. He was after getting the visas. They went through Trans-Siberian.
Just for the visas, just to think that he hid in the consulate. I mean, how many people did they?
Yeah, nobody.
Could have
there
said,
thousands.
come back, come.
Yeah.
What are you doing? And
yeah, because they really were afraid, and he just went in and he said, I'm not going out of here without the visas. He had all the documents and he was sitting there and getting all the papers. So he got the papers, he did what he had to do, and then when they got to India, this is another story, the survival in India, the growth, and my father was getting tissues and materials for my mother to sew, and to, this is it's a whole fight on a whole survivor story. And then when they came to Brazil, they didn't speak Portuguese, and my mother hardly learned English during the war, and in Brazil they don't speak English. And then you have the whole story of how they survived in Brazil and how they survived in São Paulo, and the children, and we were educated, and we graduated and post-graduated and master degree, and we did everything we had to do.
Well, Sylvia, it's been incredible hearing the story. It really has.
This is Jewish. This is our story.
I just want to mention, your parents must be extremely proud of you, because you are continuing the legacy.
Hashem is behind everything.
Absolutely.
We are there. We have everything starts and finishes because he just puts the hand the right place. He just gives it the right move, and that's I really believe in being here. It's a miracle that I'm here.
Well, I want to thank you so much, and it's been
thank you
really,
very much.
It's been so special speaking to you and hearing your just. There are no words to describe the story. The one miracle after another, to be part of the Sugihara story. It's such an honor. It's such a privilege and honor, and I really want to thank you very much.
I thank you.